Hey, what's up, everybody? If you're enjoying the video, please hit that subscribe button and give a thumbs up. And don't forget to ring that notification bell so you don't miss out on any future videos. It really helps support the channel and allows me to keep creating content for you guys.
My name is Minji and I once believed in fairy tales. 3 years ago, when Tae-woo asked me to marry him beneath the cherry blossoms, I thought I had found my happy ending. He was successful, kind, and looked at me like I was the only woman in the world. His family seemed perfect too, especially his mother, who embraced me with such warmth during our first meeting that I cried in the car afterward. "She's nothing like other mothers-in-law," I told my sister. She gave me her mother's jade bracelet and said she'd always wanted a daughter. We married quickly and I moved into their family home while we saved for our own place. The first few weeks were blissful. His mother, Mrs. Kim, taught me family recipes and told me stories about Tae-woo's childhood. Every night, Tae-woo would hold me close and whisper, "I'm so happy you're here with us." But on our 1-month anniversary, something changed. I had prepared a special dinner for just Tae-woo and me, setting up our room with candles and flowers. When he didn't come home by 8, I called him. "I'm having dinner with Mother," he said, his voice oddly formal. "She wasn't feeling well today, so I'm keeping her company. But today is our—" "I know what today is, Minji," he interrupted. "Mother needs me tonight. We'll celebrate another time." When he came home past midnight, he slipped into bed without a word. I lay awake, a strange unease creeping through me. The candles had burned out hours ago, leaving only hardened wax and the fading scent of roses. The next morning at breakfast, Mrs. Kim smiled at me across the table. "Tae-woo tells me you made a lovely dinner last night," she said, stirring her tea. "So thoughtful of you to understand he needed to be with his mother instead." Something in her tone made my skin prickle. Tae-woo stared down at his food, never once meeting my eyes. "Of course," I replied, the words feeling foreign in my mouth. "Family comes first." Mrs. Kim reached across the table and patted my hand. "I'm so glad you understand that, dear. Not everyone would." That was the first moment I felt it. Something quietly suffocating beneath the polite smiles and perfect facade of our family life. But I dismissed it, telling myself I was being oversensitive. How wrong I was. The changes came gradually, like a slow-moving tide that you don't notice until you're already drowning. Mrs. Kim's suggestions became expectations, then demands, all delivered with the same sweet smile. "Minji dear, too prefers his shirts ironed this way," she would say, redoing my work. "Minji, in our family we don't use so much salt in the soup. Minji, perhaps you shouldn't wear that dress to the family gathering. It's a bit modern." I tried to adapt, to become the daughter-in-law she wanted. I changed how I dressed, spoke, and even walked, more quietly now to avoid disturbing her afternoon naps. Tae-woo noticed none of it, or if he did, he said nothing. Instead, he began to echo his mother's criticisms. "Mother mentioned you didn't visit her parents' graves with her last week," he said one evening, his voice cold and distant. "I had that job interview, Tae-woo. I told you both weeks ago." He frowned. "Family obligations should come first, Minji." Mother was embarrassed to go alone. But she wasn't alone. "Your sisters were there." "It's not the same," he snapped. "As my wife, you represent me." This became our new pattern. Mrs. Kim would complain to Tae-woo about something I had done, or failed to do, and he would confront me later, always taking her side. The loving man who had proposed to me was vanishing before my eyes, replaced by a dutiful son who saw me as an extension of his mother's will. 6 months into our marriage, I discovered I was pregnant. For a brief, shining moment, everything seemed to improve. Tae-woo was attentive again, and Mrs. Kim beamed with pride, telling all her friends she would be a grandmother. This is what we needed, I thought. A baby will make us a real family. But as my body changed, so did Mrs. Kim's behavior. She began accompanying me to doctor appointments, answering questions before I could speak. She rearranged our bedroom to make space for a nursery without asking me. She even switched my prenatal vitamins for traditional herbs she prepared. "These have been used in our family for generations," she insisted when I expressed concern. "Every Kim baby has been born strong because of them." When I mentioned this to Tae-woo, he seemed annoyed. "Mother is trying to help, Minji. She raised 3 children successfully. What do you know about having babies?" The isolation grew worse. Mrs. Kim suggested I quit my new job and Tae-woo agreed. "Mother will take care of everything while I'm at work," he said as if this solved all problems. She doesn't want you straining yourself. Soon I rarely left the house without Mrs. Kim. My friends' calls went unanswered because stress isn't good for the baby. My parents' visits were limited to 1 hour on Sundays because too much excitement disrupts the household harmony. My pregnancy became a prison, and Mrs. Kim was both my warden and Tae-woo's informant. One afternoon in my 7th month I overheard them talking in the garden. "She's been texting her sister again about moving out," Mrs. Kim said quietly. "I saw her phone when she was napping." My heart stopped. She was going through my phone? "Don't worry, Mother," Tae-woo replied. "I've already decided we're staying here after the baby comes. It makes the most sense financially, and you'll be here to teach her how to be a proper mother. She's not ready for that responsibility too. I've seen how careless she can be." "I know, Mother. That's why we need you." I slipped away before they could see me, my hands shaking so badly I could barely make it to our bedroom. I locked the door and wept silently into a pillow, feeling the baby kick inside me as if protesting the injustice alongside me. That night I confronted Tae-woo about moving out, saying nothing about what I'd overheard. "We need our own space to be our own family." His face hardened. "This is our family, Minji. Mother has given up everything for me, for us. How can you be so selfish?" "Selfish? I've done everything she's asked. I've changed everything about myself." "You're being dramatic," he said dismissively. "Mother only wants what's best for our child. If you were a more grateful daughter-in-law you would see that." The argument escalated until Mrs. Kim appeared at our door, face twisted with concern. "What's happening? This can't be good for the baby." Tae-woo immediately softened. "It's nothing, Mother. Minji is just emotional because of the pregnancy." They exchanged a look I had seen too many times before, complicity disguised as concern. In that moment I realized I wasn't married to just Tae-woo. I was bound to both of them, trapped in a relationship where I would always be outnumbered. 2 weeks before my due date I woke to sharp shooting pains. Terrified, I shook Tae-woo awake, but before he could respond Mrs. Kim was already in our room. "I heard you cry out," she said, hovering over me. "Is it time?" The question seemed eager, almost hungry. Through my pain I felt a chill. How had she heard me from across the house when I'd barely made a sound? At the hospital everything happened in a blur. The doctors said the baby was in distress and recommended an emergency C-section. As they prepared me for surgery Mrs. Kim never left my side, even as nurses suggested she wait outside. "I'm her mother now," she told them firmly. "She needs me." Tae-woo stood silently by the door, nodding in agreement. When I regained consciousness the room was filled with flowers and balloons. And Mrs. Kim was holding my son. "There's my beautiful grandson," she cooed, not even glancing at me. "Grandmother's perfect little boy." Tae-woo stood beside her looking at our child with wonder. Neither of them moved to bring him to me. "Let me hold him," I whispered, my voice hoarse. Mrs. Kim looked up as if surprised to see me awake. "Oh Minji, the doctor said you need rest." "Don't worry, I've got him." "Tae-woo," I pleaded. "Please." He hesitated, then took the baby from his mother and brought him to me. As I reached for my son Mrs. Kim stepped forward. "Support his head properly, Minji. Not like that. Here, let me show you." And before I could protest she had taken him back, demonstrating the correct way to hold a newborn. Tae-woo watched her admiringly. "Mother has such natural instincts," he said. "We're lucky to have her." The days after returning home were a nightmare. Mrs. Kim had converted my home office into her bedroom, to be closer to the baby at night. She intercepted every cry, every feeding, every diaper change. "You need to recover from your surgery," she insisted. "I'll take care of him." When visitors came to see the baby she presented him proudly, telling stories about the difficult delivery and how she had saved the day by being there. I sat silently, feeling like a surrogate who had served her purpose. At night I would sneak into the nursery to be with my son, only to often find Mrs. Kim already there, rocking him and whispering to him in the darkness. "Grandmother's special boy doesn't need anyone else, does he?" "No, he doesn't." 3 weeks after the birth I found Mrs. Kim in our bedroom, going through my personal documents. When confronted she claimed she was organizing things, since I was too overwhelmed to do it myself. That same day I discovered she had been opening mail addressed to me, including a letter from my sister inviting me to stay with her for a while. That night, I waited until everyone was asleep, then checked Mrs. Kim's room while she was in the nursery. In her drawer, I found my birth control pills, the ones that had mysteriously disappeared shortly after our wedding. And beside them, a small notebook filled with observations about me. What I ate, when I slept, who I spoke to, even notes about my menstrual cycle before I got pregnant. The final page contained a list titled, "After Baby Comes," with detailed plans for how the child would be raised, when he would start school, which activities he would pursue, even which university he should attend. My name appeared only twice in the entire document, both times with the note, "Convince Tae-woo if she resists." My hands trembled as I took photos of every page with my phone. This wasn't just controlling behavior. This was calculated manipulation of my entire life. And Tae-woo was complicit. When I confronted him with the evidence the next morning, showing him the notebook and the hidden pills, he stared at me as if I were a stranger. "You went through Mother's private things?" he asked, his voice dangerously quiet. "How could you invade her privacy like that?" "Her privacy? What about mine? She's been tracking my entire life through. He hid my birth control. She's planning our son's life without even consulting me." He snatched my phone and deleted the photos before I could stop him. "Mother only wants what's best for this family. Everything she's done has been to protect us. From your impulsiveness, your modern ideas about family." Modern ideas? Like wanting to make decisions about my own body? About my child's future. "Our child," he corrected coldly. "And in this family we respect our elders' wisdom." "This isn't respect, too. This is control. And you've allowed it, encouraged it, since the day we married." The nursery door opened and Mrs. Kim appeared with the baby in her arms, her face a mask of hurt and betrayal. "I heard everything," she said, her voice trembling perfectly. "After all I've done for you, Min. I welcomed you into our home, taught you our ways, even overlooked your many shortcomings. And this is how you repay me? With accusations and disrespect." She turned to Tae-woo, tears flowing now. "I only wanted to help. Your wife has never understood our family traditions, how we care for each other. I thought in time she would learn, but—" "Don't," I interrupted, my voice stronger than it had been in months. "Don't pretend this is about tradition or family. This is about control. You never wanted a daughter-in-law. You wanted a servant who would give you a grandchild you could claim as your own." Mrs. Kim gasped dramatically, clutching my son tighter. "How dare you? Tae-woo, are you going to let her speak to your mother this way?" Tae-woo moved to stand beside his mother, taking the baby from her arms, not to bring him to me but to shield him from me, as if I were the threat. "I think you need to calm down, Minji," he said coldly. "You're not thinking clearly. Maybe you should go stay with your sister for a few days, like you've apparently been planning behind my back." "I'm not leaving without my son," I said, stepping toward them. "Our son needs stability," Tae-woo replied. "And right now you're not stable. Listen to your husband, Minji," Mrs. Kim added, her voice honey-sweet again. "Take some time for yourself. We'll take good care of the baby until you're better." The realization hit me like a physical blow. They were trying to separate me from my child. This had been the plan all along, to push me to my breaking point, then declare me unfit, keeping my son for themselves. "You won't take him from me," I said, my voice shaking with fury and fear. "Either we leave together, my son and I, or I'm calling the police right now." Tae-woo's eyes narrowed. "And tell them what? That your mother-in-law is helping too much? That your husband is concerned about your erratic behavior? That you've been going through other people's private things and making wild accusations?" In that moment, looking at the man I had once loved, I saw a stranger. Someone who had been molded from childhood to prioritize his mother's wants above all else, even his wife's well-being. "Give me my son, Tae-woo," I demanded, holding out my arms. Instead, he turned and walked away, carrying our baby back to the nursery with Mrs. Kim close behind him. "This conversation is over," he called over his shoulder. "Take some time to think about your behavior, Minji. When you're ready to apologize to Mother, we can discuss your role in this family going forward." The door closed behind them and I heard the distinct click of a lock. That night, while they slept, I packed a small bag with essentials. I called my sister, speaking in whispers, explaining enough that she understood the urgency without knowing the full horror of my situation. "I'll be waiting," she promised. "Just get out of there safely." At 3 in the morning, I crept into the nursery through the connecting bathroom, a route Mrs. Kim had overlooked in her careful planning. My son was asleep in his crib, perfect and peaceful. I lifted him gently, wrapping him in the blanket my mother had made, and secured him to my chest with the baby carrier. As I tiptoed down the stairs, a floorboard creaked. I froze, listening intently for any sound of movement. After a minute of silence, I continued toward the front door. My hand was on the doorknob when the lights suddenly flooded the entryway. Going somewhere, Minji? Mrs. Kim stood at the top of the stairs, Tae-woo beside her. Neither looked surprised. How did you know? I asked, clutching my son tighter. Tae-woo held up his phone. You didn't delete your call history. Did you think we wouldn't check after your behavior today? Mrs. Kim descended the stairs slowly, each step deliberate. We've been watching you for hours, waiting to see what you would do. And you've proven exactly what I told Tae-woo. You're unstable, selfish, willing to separate a child from his father and grandmother. I'm his mother, I said fiercely. And I'm leaving this toxic household. If Tae-woo wants to be part of our lives, he can visit us at my sister's. Tae-woo laughed bitterly. You think I'd let my son live in that tiny apartment? With your unmarried sister and her lifestyle? If you want to leave, go. But the baby stays here where he belongs. You can't stop me, I said, my hand returning to the doorknob. Actually, Mrs. Kim interjected, her voice suddenly businesslike, we can. She produced a folder from behind her back and opened it. Inside were medical reports. My medical reports, with certain sections highlighted. Postpartum depression can be so serious, she said, shaking her head sadly. Delusions, paranoia, irrational behavior. Even thoughts of running away with the child. She looked up at me, her eyes cold. The doctor was very concerned when we spoke to him this afternoon. He's already signed the preliminary evaluation. My blood ran cold. You told my doctor I'm having a breakdown? We told him the truth, Tae-woo said firmly. That you've been acting erratically, making accusations, becoming paranoid about your mother-in-law's help, and now attempting to flee with our newborn in the middle of the night. Mrs. Kim's smile was almost pitying. If you walk out that door with the baby, Minji will call the police immediately. And with these medical documents, who do you think they'll believe? The trap was complete. They had anticipated everything, prepared for this moment meticulously. If I left with my son, I'd be branded an unstable mother, possibly face criminal charges. If I left without him, I might never get him back. This isn't right, I whispered, tears streaming down my face. You can't do this. We're trying to help you, Mrs. Kim insisted, stepping closer. You're not well, Minji. But we can get through this as a family. Just give Tae-woo the baby and we'll forget this happened. For a moment I stood frozen in indecision. Then slowly I reached for my phone. What are you doing? Tae-woo demanded. Without answering, I hit play on the recording that had been running since I entered the nursery, capturing every word of their threats, their manipulation, their plot to declare me mentally unfit. I sent this recording to my sister and my parents 5 minutes ago. I lied, watching their faces change. Along with photos of that notebook and documentation of everything that's happened since we married. If anything happens to me or my son, they'll take it straight to the police. Mrs. Kim's composure cracked. You're bluffing. Am I? Check your bedroom drawer, Mother. Your precious notebook isn't there anymore. It was a gamble. I hadn't actually taken the notebook, just the photos on my now-deleted phone, but the flash of panic in her eyes told me it had landed. Let me pass, I said quietly, or everyone will know what you've done. Tae-woo and his mother exchanged a long look, some unspoken communication passing between them. This isn't over, he finally said, stepping aside. I opened the door and stepped out into the cool night air, my son still sleeping peacefully against my chest. Freedom was just steps away, my sister's car waiting at the end of the block, a new life possible. But as I walked away, I heard Mrs. Kim's voice one last time. You'll be back, Minji. A child needs his family, his whole family. And Tae-woo has rights too. This isn't an escape, it's just a postponement. I didn't look back, but her words followed me like a shadow. I knew she was right about one thing. This wasn't over. There would be custody battles, legal fights, years of navigating a co-parenting relationship with a man who had chosen his mother over his wife and child. The war had just begun. But at least now I was fighting with my eyes open. As I slid into my sister's car, my sons still sleeping against my heart, I wondered if I would ever truly be free of them. The legal system might force me to share my child with the very people who had tried to erase me from his life. The nightmare wasn't ending. It was evolving. But looking down at my son's peaceful face, I made a silent promise. They won't do to you what they did to your father. You will know how to love without controlling. You will know how to be loyal without being cruel. And you will know your mother fought for you even when it seemed impossible. As we drove away from the house that had become my prison, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Hope. It was fragile, uncertain, shadowed by the battles to come, but it was there. And for tonight that would have to be enough.